Hello everyone, welcome to your guide to popular builds and Heroes of the Storm. My name is Death, and today we'll be checking out Falstad's Mage build. But before we get into any of that, a quick disclaimer. These guides are not written in stone. They are here to point you in the right direction, but ultimately they are a tool to help you learn the hero on your own. Now that we've gotten through that, let's take a look at Falstad. He is a ranged assassin from the Warcraft universe, and while there were rumors floating around that Falstad was dead, he is, in fact, alive and well. After hiring a new PR agent, the Thane of the Wildhammer clan made his way to the Nexus to bring the lightning and make his enemies a little extra crispy. His kit grants him a lot of mobility and allows him to dish out some solid damage at a relatively safe range. Before we get into his talent build, let's take a quick look at his skills. His trait is called Tailwind. This grants Falstad a 20% increase to his movement speed after not taking damage for 6 seconds. This gives Falstad the ability to reposition as a fight is breaking out as long as he hasn't taken any damage. But really, his trait is mostly useful because he doesn't have a mount, and the increased movement speed allows him to shift lanes or get to an objective a little quicker when his flight is on cooldown. Speaking of flight, Falstad does not have a traditional mount. Instead, he has the ability to fly a great distance over terrain. This has a 45-second cooldown and a slight wind-up, but it gives him a lot of flexibility when it comes to travel. Falstad's Q is called Hammerang. This is a 10-second cooldown skill shot that throws a hammer that returns to you, dealing moderate damage to enemies and slowing them by 25% for 2 seconds. This is a great ability with a moderate range that brings some utility as well as damage. And remember, the hammer does damage and slows both directions, so make sure you have some good positioning for the return flight. His W is called Lightning Rod. This is a 15-second cooldown, targeted ability that deals moderate damage to an enemy and light damage with smaller lightning strikes every second for 4 seconds, as long as you keep them close. After hitting the enemy with the first strike, a small circle will appear around you. Just make sure you keep the enemy within that circle for the follow-up strikes. This is an all-around great damage ability as long as you can get those strikes off on an enemy. Just don't focus too much on keeping them in range and get yourself out of position. Falstad's E is called Barrel Roll. This is a 14-second cooldown dash that allows you to, well, do a barrel roll and quickly move in a direction, also granting you a shield for 2 seconds. This is an amazing ability that allows you to escape, reposition, or even help you out in duels with the shield. Now that we've covered his base abilities, let's take a look at his heroics. His first heroic is called Hinterland Blast. This is a 100-second cooldown, long range, narrow skill shot that sends out a massive bolt of lightning that does a lot of damage to enemies caught in its path. This ability provides a lot of burst damage from a very long range. Just keep in mind that the skill shot has a very narrow width and can be difficult to hit. Falstad's second heroic is called Mighty Gust. This is a 60-second cooldown, directional AoE that pushes enemies away from you and slows their movement speed by 60% that decays over 5 seconds. This is an amazing utility tool that allows you to make some impressive plays. However, it can be a little difficult to know when the best time to use it is, as you can throw people out of friendly heroics and abilities or even assist the enemy team in getting into your back line. Before we move on, I just want to point out that this build has a lot of variety depending on your situation, and there is a heavier damage variant that I will cover as we move along. Anyway, let's fly through these talents. At level 1, you're going to go with Gathering Storm. This talent permanently increases Hammerang's damage by 2 every time it damages an enemy hero. Yes, every time. That means if it goes out and damages someone and then comes back in, damaging them again, you will get an additional 4 damage just for hitting that one enemy. This talent will reward you for great positioning and landing your skill shot, giving you a great amount of damage toward the mid and late game. At level 4, you have a choice to make. This choice really comes down to personal preference and allows you to build toward different things at later levels. If you're looking to hit enemies with your Hammerang from a safer distance, then you'll go with Power Throw. This increases the range of Hammerang by 40% and also gives you a little more utility by increasing its slow duration by 25%. If you are really good at keeping your trait Tailwind active, then you may want to go with Flow Rider, which increases the recharge rate of your basic abilities by 100% while Tailwind is active. This means you'll be able to throw out more damage in lane and during team fights. Just make sure you have good positioning and try not to take any damage. At level 7, you're going to go with Boomerang. This gives you the ability to reactivate Hammerang mid-flight to make it explode, dealing moderate damage to enemies near the hammer. This doesn't affect the flight pattern of Hammerang, it just gives you a lot more burst damage. For Falstad's Heroic, a major build variant comes into play. The first variant, I would highly recommend you go with Mighty Gust. This is an amazing utility tool that can help you save your team from terrible engagements or displace the enemy team, allowing for some great follow-up, all on a 60-second cooldown. The other variant I will call the Burst Damage build. For this variant, I would highly recommend taking Hinterland Blast. This is going to give you a lot of extra burst damage and synergizes very well with the rest of his kit. Just remember that Hinterland Blast is on a 100-second cooldown, so make sure you're getting the most out of this heroic when you use it. At level 13, you have a few choices to make. The choices come down to a combination of personal preference and group need. If your group lacks the ability to deal with high health heroes, or you're just looking to get a bit more damage out there, then you will go with Giant Killer. This makes your basic attacks against enemy heroes deal bonus damage equal to 1.5% of their maximum health, and is a great tool when dealing with the heroes like a Globe-Fed Stitches or a Cho'Gall. If you're looking at helping your team with a little more utility, then you will go with Crippling Hammer. This increases the movement speed slow of Hammerang to 50%. I've said it before, but slows are a great tool in helping securing kills during and after team fights. However, if you find that you are being focused heavily during team fights or getting caught out by aggressive rotations, then I would recommend going with Static Shield. This grants you a shield equal to 5% of your maximum health after every Lightning Rod strike. This shield will last 4 seconds and it can stack. This talent really takes advantage of enemies who like to dive in past your front line and can go a long way to helping you win out in 1v1 situations. At level 16, you have another choice to make that has a lot to do with your previous talent choices and what you feel your team could use more of. If you're looking at adding even more utility to your Hammerang, then you're going to go with Hammer Time. This will make it so your enemies can't touch this by making your first auto attack stun enemies who are slowed by Hammerang for 3/4 of a second. This is a great tool that can stop channel heroics and stop enemies from escaping you. If you went with Flow Rider for the ability recharge, or you just want to be able to move a bit faster when out of combat, I would recommend you go with Airy Gusts. This reduces the activation time for Tailwind to 2 seconds and increases its movement speed bonus to 30%. That means that Flow Rider will be active a bit more as long as you can stay safe, which means more abilities and more damage. While the other two talents would work well for the burst damage build, if you did decide to go that route, I would highly recommend you take Overdrive at this talent tier. This gives you a 25-second cooldown that once active grants you 25% more ability power for 5 seconds. However, it also increases the mana cost of abilities by 40%. This is a great tool that can be used with your heroic to put an immense amount of burst damage down range. Just keep an eye on that mana bar. At level 20, you have more choices to make. Your first option, and my personal favorite, is Epic Mount. This reduces the cooldown of flight to 20 seconds, reduces the cast time to half a second, and increases the flight speed by 50%. This talent gives you the ability to essentially be everywhere on the map at once, and while it isn't as beneficial on smaller maps, it can still allow you to make some very impressive plays. If you were looking at dealing a bit more damage, or you went with Giant Killer, I would recommend you go with Nexus Frenzy. This increases your basic attack speed by 20% and attack range by 20%, allowing you to get more auto attacks out from a safer distance. And again, while the other two talents would work very well with the variant build, if you did end up going that route, I would recommend you take Call of the Wildhammer. This doubles the range of Hinterland Blast and increases its damage by 25%, giving you even more burst damage from a safer range. Falstad's Mage build is a very strong build that brings strong lane clear, great mobility, makes him a solid duelist that has massive impact on team fights, and has some great build diversity, allowing you to pick the right talent for the right situation. However, while he is mobile, he doesn't have a mount, so you need to think ahead if Fly is down. Knowing when to use Mighty Gust can be a little tough, and Hinterland Blast can be very hard to hit. And there is some talent ramp up time for his damage. Alright, now that we've covered all of that, let's go over some quick tips for Falstad. Hammerang travels out and then back in, and Gathering Storm takes advantage of that, allowing you to get double credit towards its damage bonus as long as you have proper positioning with your skill shots. Along that line, Hammerang travels back to you, so you can move to reposition its flight trajectory if the enemy tries to dodge the return flight. For both heroics, positioning is very important. For Hinterland's Blast, you want to make sure you are lining up as many people as you can in order to take advantage of the burst damage. If your team has a lot of roots or AoE stuns, I would recommend you hold off for your team to land one of them before letting the lightning loose. Nothing hurts your damage more than whiffing your 100-second heroic. Mighty Gust is a bit more difficult to use properly, as it requires you to be able to quickly read the situation. Is your team moving in for the kill? Can you isolate one person from the enemy team with a gust from the side? Was this a bad engagement, and do you need Gust to save your team from a wipe? These are all questions that you should be asking yourself before using Mighty Gust, and it will take some practice to get right. Take full advantage of your fly ability by split soaking a lane, and right before a team fight starts, fly down to a good position and start dishing out the pain. Just make sure you keep an eye on your mini-map and don't show up to the party late. Along the same line, you can use Fly to aggressively position yourself to prevent the enemy from escaping or to better access their back line. Just don't get yourself too far out of position, because you may find yourself alone and the focus of the enemy's aggression. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this guide helpful. If you have any variations or tips for this build, feel free to share them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I will catch you all later.